Good afternoon, and welcome to the June specially called Design Review Committee meeting. The DRC is a subcommittee of the Historic Zoning Commission, and our meeting today is designed to be informal and designed to guide the applicant through the process of obtaining a certificate of appropriateness for projects within the city's historic districts, given the historic design guidelines. Applicant participation in DRC meetings is voluntary, but highly recommended, and we're glad you all are here today. Changes made or suggestions taken by the applicant based on the discussions within the DRC are always the applicant's choice. We cannot make any representation as to whether the changes or suggestions made during the meeting will be approved by the ultimate voting body, which is the Historic Zoning Commission. So today our purpose is to provide feedback on the new City Hall building, exterior design development, and the park schematic design prior to the Certificate of Appropriateness application coming forward. So we're glad to see you here. The applicant plans to spend time focused on the proposed exterior design and site and the park design today. And our fine staff is going to give us an overview of where we are in the process and the meeting format today. So, Kelly.
Good evening, everyone, or I should say good afternoon. Thank you for being here before the Historic Zoning Commission meeting today. It's our 9th DRC focused on this landmark building to be redeveloped on the public square in downtown Franklin. And so we have some refinements to show on the elevations on the different sides of the building, especially related to the main entrance facing the square and the storefront facing 3rd Avenue. And then we'll spend time, the second part of the meeting, on the park progress and some initial conceptual concepts going forward for the 1-acre park that is planned for the corner of Church Street and 3rd Avenue South. So I'll turn it over to our consultant team. They have a great presentation to show, and we're excited to showcase what it has. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Rose Kemmerow. I'm principal with Studio 8 Design. I'm here with Gary C. Ball, principal at OHM Advisors, our architectural partner on the project. We also have KVD behind me. They're going to be presenting the park after we're finished with the building exterior. So as Kelly mentioned, we've divided the meeting into 2 parts. Gary and I are going to review the building exterior design development, and we're going to try to keep the overview to about 5 minutes so we can allow plenty of time for discussion on the revisions, and then we'll turn it over to KVD for an overview of the park and site and discussion at the end of the meeting. So on this first slide, you can see the south and west elevations. As a reminder, the west elevation is the entry elevation facing the square. I'm going to start there with that one. In our last meeting, the committee commented that the canopy was too close to the design of the 231 building canopies and may look a little bit too much like a movie theater entrance. And so we narrowed up that canopy just to be the width of the arched opening and removed the turnbuckle connections back to the wall. We also looked at the arched windows. A suggestion was made to do arched top sash on the double hung windows, which we did on this elevation. It used to have double hung windows with arched transoms. And then we added pilasters to the 3rd level. You can see the 2 brick pilasters on either side above the entry. And then we're suggesting that we put the year that the building will be complete in 2027 up in the pediment. So then moving to the elevation at the bottom of the slide, which is the south elevation facing 3rd Avenue. The committee asked us to study looking at removing the pediment on this elevation. So in your slide packet, you'll see on the next slide, we show the 2 elevations without the pediment. And then if you scroll back, you can see it with the pediment. The design team really thinks that the pediment brings a lot to the 3rd Avenue facade. It carries the Greek Revival influence to 3rd Avenue, tying it with the entry elevation. It increases the sense of symmetry on this elevation. It helps top off the center portion of that elevation and adds visual interest to the parapet. So we're going to move on to the 2-story commercial portion of the elevation. A suggestion was made to look at the ground floor storefronts without divided lights. We changed that to plate glass windows with transoms above, carried the transom line across to the entry doors into the commercial. We again looked at arched top sashes on the arched windows and thought that that was a nice detail. We pared back the arched brick detail over the arched openings. And then a comment was made about the cornice being too simple, so we added some brick corbelling with a limestone cap. And then the center portion, a comment was made that the brick seemed too heavy above the wood storefront. We brought the edges of the wood storefront in and carried the brick down to the ground, and then we added a cornice detail on that wood storefront that you'll see better in the renderings later in the presentation. And then moving to the east and north elevations, the north elevation is the elevation facing the alley and the Second Avenue parking garage. In the last meeting, the committee was happy with this elevation. We did make a plan adjustment since then. We shifted the community room to the exterior wall, which allowed us to add windows to the first floor in one of those limestone bands. So that was a difference that we wanted to point out. And then the east elevation faces Church Street and the park that KBD will be reviewing. We turned the storefront detailing in that patina green color around the corner, extended the more ornate cornice until you get to the more kind of service loading zone area of the City Hall portion of the elevation. I think that's all. So we provided some updated 3D rendering views of the building. So again, this just gives you a view of some of the changes, the canopy change, the arched windows, and the pilasters at the third level. You can see the pediment on 3rd Avenue and how it anchors that prominent building corner. And then another view of the corner with the pediment and without the pediment. And then the view of the 3-story portion of City Hall. A couple things on this elevation. We shifted the flagpole's location from the square to be in front of this boardroom portion of the elevation, just signifying its civic presence, being across from the courthouse and kind of giving the building a civic presence as you approach the square from 96, and just getting the flagpoles out of the way of, you know, the festivals and events on the square. BOMA asked us to look at adding an ADA ramp on the 3rd Avenue side of the building, so we have. It's there in the front. You can see the railings of it with the planter out in front of it. And then you can see the commercial further down 3rd. I think that's it on this one. Again, without the pediment. And then this is just a straight-on view, so you can see the comparison again of the 3-story portion and then straight-on view of the commercial. You can see the flagpoles in the front. And then this is a view taken from the pedestrian view in front of the commercial back towards the square. You can see the dental work on the wood storefront surround on the center portion of the building more clearly. We're showing the possibility of arm-mounted blade signage, or we've maintained a signage ban for building-mounted signage. You can see the cornice detail and the windows in more detail. And then this is a view from across 3rd Avenue of the commercial. You can see the outdoor seating potential to the side of the commercial building. We've left the park generic for now because, of course, we want to get your feedback on our park concepts before rendering that. And then we have the screen wall for the loading service zone of City Hall that you can see in the background. And with that, I think that's an overview of all the revisions we made. We'll leave some time for discussion. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Kathy, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, I'd be happy to. My question about the portion of the building on the 3rd Street elevation that has the second pediment feature, does that section of the building, is there any entrance into that building at that section?
No, as you can see in this rendering,
Yeah,
see the planter in front of it? The window sills are 4 feet high
Okay.
off the ground, and you can't even walk up to those windows as a safety feature.
okay. Part of me likes having 2 pediments, but I do like the pediment as identifying entry to the front elevation, which is on the square. So I would support only the one pediment for that reason. But I think you've done a really handsome job. I love the storefront detailing, and then especially wrapping that around to catch that fenestration of the edge. Does it do the same on the other side? Good.
At the courtyard side, yes, we just don't have a
Yes.
good view of that.
Yes, yes. So that's about all I have to say
Okay.
Thank you.
right now.
Lisa?
I agree with Kathy about the pediment. Aesthetically, I understand why you're saying that you want the two, but it does seem to indicate an entrance, and there's not an entrance. So I would echo that. And then, as I look at this, the most important elevation is the west elevation, and that's my opinion. Because again, we've got the historic courthouse that is across the street. And from the very beginning, it's been a priority to not detract, or certainly to not try to replicate what we have going on the historic courthouse side. So in general, it seems like the idea of replicating anything is not an issue, except for the balcony. It's always been a little bit problematic to me because there is a balcony on the old courthouse. And a balcony like this one is, to me, inconsistent with historic Franklin. It's consistent certainly with what we see on the historic courthouse. But again, we don't want to try to mimic what's on there. So that's always been something that I feel is outlier, I guess you would call it. The other thing is that in relation to the courthouse, the mass of that entrance is, I believe, again, these are renderings, but I believe it's going to steal from the attention that we want Franklin visitors to pay to the courthouse. There's something about that entrance that seems massive, in my opinion. And if there's any way to reduce it, or maybe even remove the two, I don't know what you call them, on the left and right with those, are those real windows or actual functioning windows?
They're not operable, but all the windows you see are real.
Yeah, I'm not sure why those two sides are there at the entrance. And in my opinion, it adds to the massive look of the west elevation. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Mary.
I agree with what's been said about the pediment. I just don't think that's a traditional building form to have two pediments. I think when we go forward, we'd want to see actual materials. I am thinking that it's not this white, and that is looking very shocking. It's making me have all kinds of suggestions because of the way it is reading, the massing and the scale. But if that is, depending on what material that is, I think we want to see what the brick is. To me, the scale looks a bit odd, really, to go to what Lisa said with the balcony, and then with the two what look like Snow White stories, and then the way the white dyes into the windows on the front and Third Avenue side, but that may all be coloring. when you see the material.
Could I say
Sure,
something?
of course.
So in the last renderings that you guys were okay with, nothing has changed material-wise. We are looking at real materials in August. We're going to put up real brick panels in front of City Hall. We're going to look at brick and limestone. The material is limestone. It has not changed. The reason we did these renderings is we wanted to make them a little bit more realistic so you could see the brick coursing. The ones you were seeing before had a real sketchy look to them.
Gotcha.
So we're trying to progress them further. I understand what you say is the white. If you look at 231 at that limestone, that's what we're looking at is that limestone color. So it is not a painted white front. On the entry, in our previous.
But there's all color, I mean, if you'll bring a sample.
We're going to have a whole panel.
Okay,
made,
and the-
like
yeah.
a 3 foot by. And then on the entry, I mean, we've had a lot of discussions about this entry in the last 8 meetings and have kind of settled on this and that the railing brought a more human scale and a more detail to that entry. So we didn't change anything of that because the consensus at our last few meetings was that it didn't compete with the courthouse. And we hear you, but we have been very intentional about trying to not compete with the historic courthouse and keeping the height down and differentiating it and not replicating it.
Okay, thanks. Tyler?
I think I do agree with everyone on the pediment. I think it's handsome in that one view, but in combination with the other view, I think it's probably okay to lose it. I think it is a useful element in breaking up that facade because it is really long, but I think that 2-story kind of limestone portion there does some of that too, and I think it does it pretty well. So I think I could concur with everyone on that one. The front entry, I don't see that it competes with next door all that much. In the rail and in those type of things, I mean, this rail's not undercover. The other one is. It's a taller kind of 2-story porch. So I don't think it's going to read that way. And I'm reminded too that, I mean, the historic courthouse, there's a reason that it's the scale it was. It was built a long time ago and served, this many people, and now we're talking about a much larger community, and this structure is big, and it's something we've wrestled with in terms of, we want it to be down here, it needs to be a certain size to be useful, so I think you've done a good job of breaking it up into pieces. I think that the massing you've come up with, like we discussed before, has broken it into manageable pieces. I personally think that the canopy over the front doors is probably less kind of historically typical. Those usually do overlap a little bit, which I think it was suggested by other folks to take that out, but any historic one I've ever seen overlaps the corner a little bit. Not to say it has to have the turnbuckles and all that. Down the 3rd Ave side, I'm looking at some of this brick detailing that's happening on the retail. And it might just be rendering limitations, which I know there are some. I love the kind of brick corbelling at the top. The little coins that are in between, are those just kind of brick hexagons? Is that what I'm seeing? So how are you all thinking those? Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Based on that, I was like, what is that, first of all? And is it terracotta or what? I've seen variety, so that makes sense. That helps. Yeah, I noticed some of the arched windows were kind of segmented, and I thought that's probably just a rendering thing. And then I wanted to respond to back area as well, or really the side facing the park. I spent a lot of time looking at page 13, which is the park corner there from across the street, basically where the church is. Once we get to look at the park, I'm considering what this side elevation here that faces kind of our existing parking lot might look like with the canopies, or I'm sort of sensitive to this particular spot because it is kind of the gateway to downtown. It's the first thing people see, which is why the park's important. I think the back of house area, you've done great with this wall and the landscaping that's going to happen. But that corner with the canopies, I'm not sure it's got enough of the front language to feel like it can hold that corner, which is, to me, a very important corner. I know the one at the square is important, but everybody sees this driving into town, and you kind of have to turn around to look at the front entrance once you get on the square. So I think it could hold a little more prominence with maybe some more of that wood detailing, the kind of the way you've detailed the front facing Third. I don't know that for sure. I know there's park stuff happening, so I want to be, once all that gets resolved, I just think that with just those shades is probably just a little too lightly detailed for me. But those are my comments.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
I'd like to say that when this project first started, there was a bit of skepticism from me, about how we could pull this off as the architect, and then also with the various input from different committees and the public. But I must say what I see really exceeds my expectations. And I think you've done a great job. I would like to address a few of the things. I think the color white that's kind of been brought up, I think we're really talking about limestone colors, and these are just renderings that show a white. And I think that will really tone down quite a bit.
I do too.
When we get real limestone. I think the scale works for me on the front. I don't have any, I understand why people may have, and there was some hesitation on the balcony, but I think all that's kind of been scaled back. It seemed to be a lot more prominent at one time. So I think it's a good to have that broken up on the facade. I want to get to the pediment. So when I look at page 11 and I see both, I see the commercial side without, and then the part of City Hall without the pediment. And when I first glanced at that, I thought, well, that kind of harmonizes with that commercial part. But the more I look at it, the more I think that the pediment actually defines the civic use building. And I think that actually provides a visual cue of what it is. And I agree with you on wanting to keep that pediment. I would say on page 13, we're talking about that corner as you come in on Third, and I understand, what Tyler's referring to on that, and I can really see it. It may need to be more prominent. But if you go to any corner in Franklin, whether it's 4th Avenue, 5th Avenue, and I'm specifically thinking about 4th and 3rd, where you get south and north, any of the corners, it's pretty plain. I mean, it's pretty just brick walls with windows. Mm-hmm. You only see the actual street frontage when you get on Main Street. And I'm wondering if what your rendering shows might actually be more in keeping with what we see in downtown Franklin. But certainly, it could be more prominent. And I just, again, it's exceeded my expectations, and I look forward to walking by it one day and driving to it.
Thank you.
Great. Bob?
This is my first discussion with this, so y'all put a lot of legwork in, and it's a very handsome building. As far as the pediment on the 3rd Avenue side, I've kind of wrestled with it. I love it. I think it looks great. The only thing that gives me pause is when you see that pediment and then you see the limestone below it, it screams entrance, but it's not an entrance. So that gives me kind of pause on having the pediment there. So I like the pediment because it breaks everything up. I agree with Brian on, that shows you the civic side, but I only think of it from the aspect of, will people think that's the entrance? Because it is with the pediment, it's a very handsome entrance, but without the pediment, you know, it kind of takes that strong notion that it's an entrance away.
Could I say-
Okay, I have a few. One, I echo the good job. Like, this is really impressive work, and you've taken so much of our feedback, which is great. The unenviable task is the context and the scale of this one, I think. Like, we go out and look at things that we've approved, and we're like, oh, gosh, we didn't really appreciate the context, even though we know the street, we know the lot, we know the house, how that can feel. So I think one of the challenges that I continue to have, you just have to have a little bit of faith too, is you lose, it's just hard to gain the true context of the massing because it's so different, and we're in this part of town all the time. But I do think your sheet, like, I have had some of the same concerns some of the other commissioners have mentioned about, like, how the prominence feels on the front and the competing with the courthouse. But one of the sheets that was just up there had the courthouse etched in, and it is a lot bigger when you look at it than this, and a lot of that facade is hidden by other buildings. So that's where I think it's hard, and I think y'all are doing a really good job with it, because it's very hard contextually to see exactly how it's going to feel, because there are other buildings that are going to be blocking parts of this, and we're looking at a straight, view of it. I like the pediment on Third. I really do. And if it wasn't for the struggle of that reads like an entrance, because it really does, that's the thing that I think from a planning standpoint is the challenge, because I like how that breaks that up. It feels really like a long, heavy span without that pediment to me. And so I think that is, from a massing and all of that, is a good thing. I share the concern that people are going to try to walk up to it, and if there's windows at 4 feet high, maybe it'll be really apparent in real life that it's not an entrance. And then I've always kind of had a little hesitation on that porch. I know we've talked about it a bunch on the front, but that's been one of the things that's been a little troubling to me, and I think the scale's much better, but that's what I've got. So you had some things you wanted to add.
I do. So first, I want to remind everybody, it's not a full balcony where it's not a deep balcony. It's just really a perch, like a lot of the traditional buildings.
Oh, microphone. Yeah.
Oh, it's on. I just am not close enough. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think the next time we come meet with you, and KVD's a little further along on the landscape, we need to get a pedestrian perspective view in front of this boardroom portion of the elevation. There's a very deep planter in front of it, so you can't even walk up to the wall. I
Right.
mean, so I think the flagpoles are now there if everybody's okay with kind of that signifying this boardroom portion of the building. I think the pedestrian experience is going to be totally different than, like you said, seeing these 2D elevations, and we need to give you guys an idea of how that's going to feel, because it will never feel like an entrance when you're walking down that street with a big planter in front
Right.
of it and flagpoles. You
Yeah.
just won't.
It feels
go
like
in.
it should be when you look at it right there, even though you don't see the doors and you
Right.
don't see how to get up to it.
Yeah.
But yeah. And I think that those views that you had in some of the earlier sessions where you were all the way across the square and you could see the center of the square and the full context, I just think those are all real helpful. So, okay. All right, we're failing on time, aren't we, Kelly?
We're still good. We just made it through all the building elevation comments, and we've got our park progress
Okay,
slides
good.
next.
Great, good.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Good to see you all. Glad to be back. Appreciate your time. My name is Gary Vogel with Kaiser Vogel Design. This is Katie Garrett, with Kaiser Vogler Design. We're going to tag team this presentation and walk you through the design idea. But yeah, this is an evolution of the park space itself. Given the evolution of the building, that changed kind of the dynamic of what the space could be. So we want to really make sure that this engages the corner, the gateway you've all said it, you're taking words right out of our mouths of what this needs to be. So we're going to talk through kind of the design idea and the community involvement, participation, thoughts, as well as our design, working with staff, kind of the front end of that, and then get into the design aspect of it. So Katie's going to start off with just kind of orientation and design concepts and ideas and imagery, and then we'll get into the design of the plan. So thank you.
Great.
Yep, thanks, Gary. So the first few slides, we're going to talk a little bit about the park itself, just to help you all understand the size and scale of this. So the first slide that we have up right now shows the park area in green. So this is about a 1 acre park. To give you all a little bit of context, if you were to stand at the corner of 3rd and Church today, essentially if you were to look at the first row of parking along the alleyway, that would be the extent of the, call it, north side of the park. The other side of the park going more towards the square, if you were standing along the edge of the Moran Pope House, that would give you another context of how large this park is going to be. And we can come back to this at the end of the presentation. So the next few slides we wanted to share are some park comparisons of existing parks in Franklin. The first being the West Haven Fountain Park. That park is actually just over 1.2 acres, so about the same size of the park that we're talking about today. In addition to that, if you look at the bottom corner, that helps to also show a context of how big the West Haven Park is and the size of the proposed park we're talking about. And then the last part, as we're talking about each of these park comparisons, is we wanted to show some of the features that each of these parks have. We've been meeting with city staff and city leadership over the last several weeks, and one of the most important things that has stuck out to us is we want this park to be unique. So we wanted to make sure that as we're talking about park comparisons within Franklin, we're also talking about what those parks have and what this new park could have. The second park is the one found at 5 Points, 5th Ave and Main Street. This park is actually about half the size of what the proposed City Hall Park will be at 0.6 acres. Again, if you look at the bottom corner of the context map, that helps to highlight the size and scale of this park. And then again, several different features. Obviously, this park is a little bit more historic, and we'll talk more about that as we get into the design we're proposing. Then the last park we wanted to highlight, obviously it's a little more contemporary, but the McEwen Northside Plaza. This is linear in shape, but we still felt it was important to highlight because it has become such an important park to the community. To give you a little bit of context, the length of the park is about the same length of City Hall as it is today. And then another important feature I think worth noting is that the dimension between the wine bar and Jenny's Ice Cream is about the same length as the proposed park. So just to give you all more context there. So as Gary mentioned, we've been working with the city, we've been working with a lot of our stakeholders and the public. And one of the really interesting things that Kelly and her team did, I believe in December, January of this past year, was provide a survey for the public to respond to. And one thing I did want to bring up was one question that was asked is, when you think about a future park in downtown Franklin, what values are most important to you? And two of the biggest responses to that were community and belonging and environment and natural beauty. So just in taking that as food for thought, we also compiled, along with Kelly and her team, some images that were also provided by the community. And so these are some of the images that we felt were sharing. And then that also blends into the second slide here. You want to take it from there, Gary?
Thank you. So yeah, the collaboration of the team kind of leads us to the design of this big concept is what we want to share with you. of how this came to be in terms of how it translated from the city of Franklin ideals to how it became the park design. So looking at this graphic, we have the downtown city square blocks and the Harpeth River. Next slide, please. So the grid of the city, very defined, very regimented, very well-known and respected. Combine that with the Harpeth River. We've got these two landforms, one very gridded, one very organic and very natural. Blended together, we have this idea. So we thought, how do we translate this idea to a park project design? So we take this concept of the grid and the Harpeth River, locate that on the site as a way of means of coming up with a design that respects the history of the city of Franklin, its Harpeth River, tie that to a park that has a background image design to it, thought to it, combines the grid of the city and the Harpeth River. So we just took that same sketch that you just showed over the aerial photography, dropped it on the plan, said this is going to be our idea that really relates into the plan, so the grid and the river, Harpeth River. You'll notice that the river kind of starts along Church, navigates its way through the park, over to that little courtyard, and then the grid kind of animates that space as well. Obviously a different scale comparison, but go ahead, Katie. So next up was working with staff. Well, how do we create a bubble diagram to kind of outlay the functions of the park based on this design idea, big picture concept of the grid and the river? Go ahead, Katie. And then you can start to see the grid is kind of pushed to the edges of the street of Church and Third. The organic natural space down the middle is the river kind of circumnavigating through the space. We've got perimeter streetscape edges along Church and Third, street trees, pavers, vertical curb planters, a very vibrant streetscape that creates the edges, and then creating these spaces internally that have multiple access points, multiple surface types, different elements that engage the public, the staff, the people in the building as well, both. And then some central focal feature in the middle, kind of circular, symbolizing the square in terms of that artistic piece, but shows kind of organically how this space could function within this 1 acre size dimension. So we took that concept and created this schematic design based off of that with the grid and the river. Again, remember, this is overly structured parking. Right now, it's kind of been slated to go that direction, keep the parking. That may change, but right now, this plan needs to work in both regards. It's parking underneath the park and the building, so remember that. So again, this plan really highlights the gridded network on the bottom, Church and Third, tree wells that are seat walls, creating shade, creating the grid, different paving patterns, TBD, what those will be, but a mix of different textures and colors and, you know, pulling off architectural elements, creating different spaces throughout the park. You have a central focal piece. What I failed to mention was that diagonal edge is kind of a play off 5 points, that angle that cuts into the grid of the city and creates that angle from the corner of Third and Church to the central piece in the middle. So the gridded portion along Church and Third, again, tree well planters, a mix of hardscapes, turf, central feature, could be a fountain, could be a focal piece of art, could be many different things. But again, that organic piece that weaves its way through the park is that river element that creates that organic piece of the park that creates other opportunities for respite, just breaks up the grid, different opportunities for seating opportunities, for small, large events for people on staff, the community, but creating this gateway along the city edge into the community. We also want to make sure the Church and Third edges, that greenery respects the green on Church, brings it into the park along that edge because you have a mix of residential, commercial, obviously Third, the street trees and the planters there. But really from kind of Church towards the alley in the back, we've kind of thought about how that transitions from the grid to a more organic sense of space. Going from a gridded element to a more organic tree wells as opposed to rectangular, a river element that kind of navigates through that space, but also from that central feature, you'll see that winding piece that goes down to Third in front of the building to that plaza. That is kind of an amplification of the experience of the water through the space itself. It's not going to be water through there. That'll just be a paving pattern that kind of weaves its way into that space just to break up the grid a little bit, but that piece down the middle could be a water feature that runs from the central organic piece in the center there, that runs through that, that curvilinear piece as well, that kind of ties the grid to the organic pieces. Again, mixture of turf and lawn, but again, just breaking up the space for different size and different activities, things of that nature. The city found, the board and mayor of Alderman have mentioned to us, and their vision is preserving community, but also being progressive. So tying that into this of the history of the history of the city, as well as the future progress, and that's kind of evolved in the design of this park, but also bringing in elements the community thought about, gave us some imagery, adding to that as well. So that's kind of the big picture. Next slide. This is basically a typical streetscape section along Third and Church. Again, you have the public zone, which is the on-street parking, which we have on all edges. That transition zone, we call the flex zone, is for street trees relegated to a 6-foot planting strip. We want to have more than adequate feature for root zones, things of that nature. We want to raise those curbs up, give it a boundary, so to speak, as well. And then you got the circulation zone, which is the clear 8-foot zone that is back of the planter, enough capacity, and that's per the code in the city of Franklin. And then the tenant zone, or the building itself zone. I know we have a commercial component as well as the building itself, but this kind of shapes that edge of what those perimeter streets look like. These next two images are just conceptual ideas. This is kind of just what that central focal point could be. Don't focus on what that art is or what it isn't. It's just something that says this is the focal point. Like I said, it could be a fountain, it could be a sculpture, it could be a combination of both, it could be a landscape bed. Just something to really create that element. We see water as just very gravitational. When you see something like that and it turns into the river piece that I'm talking about sweeping through, and we have an image that kind of shows that, but just to get the flavor of that space, that diameter circle is probably 80 feet in diameter, so very sizable. You've probably got 25 feet of pavement outside the 20-foot diameter circle in the middle. So again, different size spaces for different functions to create these organic spaces and raise planters to make sure the trees grow on top of the structured parking. We want to make sure we do that. So all the trees are elevated plus or minus 18 inches, 24 inches above the parking structure to get adequate growth and tree canopy. Next slide, Katie. This is kind of an idea of what this little riverbed flowing through organically could be. We're showing water in this piece, some bridge elements to connect across. You've got some organic seating, bridges that could be public art pieces, walls that are more organic and round, and stairs and steps, and just creating these little pockets of organic spaces as opposed to the grid out front along Church and Third. This shows that concept of kind of that little water channel running through the space. So I think that's the last one. Then the overall plan there. But again, really want to just anchor this corner and create something very unique and try to tie the big idea of the city grid to the river. So be happy to answer any questions you may have about that. Thank you.
Great. Okay, Bob, we'll start with you on that end, if that's okay.
Yes, I like the entrance at the corner of Third and Church. I think that looks nice. I really like the water feature. Personally, I'd like a fountain more so than
Sure.
a piece of art. Or
Could be both.
the fountain could be a piece of art.
Sure.
And you said there'll be parking underneath.
Correct.
I don't know how that works into what type of planting
Yes.
you have to use. I wish there could be more native plants,
Absolutely. That's part of the, yes.
but I don't.
Has to be.
I don't understand all the weight bearing and having parking
A
underneath.
lot of details.
Yeah.
Correct. But yeah, we want to make sure that those trees are sustainable and the root zone, the irrigation, native species, the whole 9 yards. As you saw in those pictures in the beginning, we want a lot of color in the plant beds. We want trees, we want shade, we want all the above that the city has kind of mentioned, the natural beauty of our city.
That's it.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brian.
So Bob's actually asked most of the questions that I have. But one curiosity, so if you do have an actual water feature that runs kind of like the river, at least from the fountain out to some part, maybe close to Church Street, where is, are we seeing that actually on the drawing that we're looking at here? Where would that, would it
It's
start at the fountain?
It's that fountain, then that curve back to Church is the water feature. From the fountain, maybe pavers to that radial point, or you walk over a grate of some sort that may be water. Those details need to be designed, but the water is meant to be that that curving feature from the fountain back to Church, and then back from the fountain back to the Third Avenue to the city, that's all pavers that kind of emulate that river piece. But yeah, we'd like to see water, a runoff of some sort from that fountain back towards that sweeping organic piece along the lawn and the steps to the church street.
I think it's an interesting, creative concept.
Appreciate it.
Tyler?
Yeah, I love what you've done here. I'd be interested to see, as you develop the park kind of program further from kind of, big picture ideas of gathering or seeding to actual programmatic elements, which I know flexibility is big, but I say all that in hopes of maybe culling back some of the hardscape, just so that's a little more natural. I'm looking at the garage access that's the northern Page North there, and there's that kind of whole area there's paved. Looks like some tree wells and things, but there's quite a bit of paving at the corner of Third and Church as well. It looks like, and if there's some of the images showed like a chessboard or something, if there's a reason for it, then go for it. But if it's I trend towards a lot less paving and a good bit more kind of turf and plantings and planters, but that's my feedback.
Great. Mary?
Well, I'm glad we've got somebody to figure out how to make this work, on top of a hard surface, so thank you. I love the idea of a water feature. I will love the idea if maybe the water did go out. I probably don't think following the river is so important as just, how it settles and looks. And I do think that people would enjoy shade a lot. So it's just Gary, honestly, telling us realistically, in this environment, what you all telling us what will work. But I would probably say, just to be totally honest, the idea of following the river doesn't speak to me so much, but the idea of having the water, as you suggest, does. Thank you.
Lisa?
So, yeah, beautiful, beautiful work, and a lot of ambitious ideas. The reason I say ambitious is because the idea of having a fountain, to me, is something kind of manageable and doable, but what seems tricky to me is to have, streams running hither and yon. This is going to be a well-traveled park, and if there are features in it that are hard to maintain, that's going to take away, I think, from the beauty of what you have here. The comment by Tyler about the paving, I agree with. It would be nice to have less paving. And I know that might be tricky based on your limitations regarding what can be planted. In terms of what can be planted, and the trees that you mentioned might be a little tricky with the root system and all that. Are we talking about trees that are mostly in large boxes, or can you help us picture whether the trees are going to be in the ground or in like boundary boxes?
Sure. We'll show you some pictures. Go back to the community images that were shared at the beginning to show some of those seawall. So see that top left image? That's what we're talking about. Those
Yeah.
trees have to be elevated out of the ground. The finished grade above the deck is 15, 18 inches, can't remember, 24 inches. But we want those raised even higher. So those are seat walls that are both tree wells and active seating areas. So elevated above to give more root zones, more sustainability. So every tree will have to be elevated in some type of planter that is a seat wall.
Okay, thank you. And then, so are we talking about the boundary on Church and Third?
No, ma'am. Those are outside the parking structure, so those are at-grade planters with just a 6-inch curb,
I
vertical
see.
curb. Much like you see down Columbia Avenue, you see a vertical curb on those tree wells along Columbia Avenue. That's what we're
Oh.
proposing along Third and Church,
I see, okay.
just to create an edge there.
And then, do you consider that corner of Church and Third the main entrance, would you say, to the park?
I think
or-
there's access points, and that's the one thing about a park. You want freedom, access, welcoming all edges. You don't want to focus, you need to come in this way. Sure, that's the corner, and most people will go there, but we want people flowing from all sides.
Okay, so you
So-
purposely leave a lot of
Absolutely. We
ways
left
to
open
enter?
gaps, so from Third Avenue, those trees along Third, those are the street trees, and the 6-inch planter. Then you've got an 8-foot clear zone of white concrete. Then you've got the grid of another 25 feet or so. Then you have another row of trees. So you've got 25 feet of paving right there, trees, another lawn feature, but all the access points, we want people kind of coming from all edges.
Okay, my final comment is that I learned this from our very capable park system team, and I respect their opinion tremendously. They've done such a wonderful job here in Franklin. In terms of markers and educating the pedestrian, is that anything you've given some thought to?
We just know from the survey that the memorials and things of that nature were at the bottom. Is that what you're asking, or is it more educational elements?
Memorials or history of Franklin and, anything of that nature?
It was
that would
lower on the list, so
educate?
we didn't focus on that. There may be educational elements about stormwater and things of that nature, but the history part, that's something we just need to work into the process and plan, working with staff and the team to see how much we wanted. But it was
yeah.
lower on the list based on the community input.
We are talking about historic Franklin, so if there's some
Understood.
way to incorporate that,
Yeah.
that's my opinion.
Can I go back to one image real quick? Katie, can you go back to the Clarksville Park site? That image to the top left, there it shows up. That park there is in, and this is done through many cities. This is just one image that we showed. There's one in Huntsville. This is Clarksville. So the idea there is a water runnel that has landscape around it. So you can kind of see the water's running through there. You can step over it with a little footbridge. We're talking 8 to 10 inches. It's not very, we're not talking a river, but it's walkable, it's manageable, it has to be ADA compliant. But that's kind of an idea that shows how that could be, if that helps you visualize.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
It does.
But again, it's done very well there amongst other cities. So we thought that'd be a good image to share.
Thank you.
That's some great image.
Great. Kathy?
Guys, I just love the design process you shared us on this.
Thank you.
The city grid. I would like to see more evidence of the city grid in your pathways and emphasize it more and maybe include seating along it. I'm not, we only catch a few little squares of it and it's not reading full force. So does it reflect differently on the other side where the lawn is? I don't know. I've got half of the city pathways in it, but I just think it's a beautiful design. Access all the way in, makes it very inclusive to the user. I like the water features. It's how you play the materials, where it leads back from the sidewalk on further along down Third Street. I really, really appreciate what you've done. I don't know if I'd change a thing of it.
Great.
Well done.
Great. Mr. Orr?
Well, I like where you're heading with this stuff. I'd echo the comment about maybe a little less hardscape, a little more open grassed areas. Another thing you may want to consider is the opportunity to buy a brick and have a family name put on it or something like that to incorporate. I know that's been done several places in Franklin. It'd be a good opportunity to do that again here.
Yeah, just for scale-wise, that large green piece of lawn there, the large panel, that's about 5,500 square feet. It's like 90 by 70. So it's a very sizable piece of turf there. Those two in the front along Third are 20 by 50, so 1,000 square feet each. So they're pretty sizable. But that was the key to really have a good mix of turf and hardscape and trees. And just to create something that you felt like you want to, engage in different spaces as you so felt. So, thank you.
Yeah, my only comment, I just echo what's been said. Great job. I would lean toward more green if you can get it, especially on the back. And maybe it's, part of it is mixing, to Kathy's point, if you're emphasizing the grid of the city's streets throughout, you're working the hardscape in more but you may not be able to because of the entry piece. But if you can, I would say, that to me, just looking at it from here, it looks like there's a lot lost to hardscape in the back, so.
You're talking about near the alley?
Mhm.
Yeah, and the reason for that, you have parallel parking back there, but that's also a potential for a food truck access piece. So we want to make sure that you can get to that alley pedestrian, and that's why we added that extra row of trees. But we'll look at that
Yeah.
space, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, any other comments from the committee? All right. Any other-
Lovely addition.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I would say that I think the success of this, honestly, is going to depend a lot on providing shade,
Agreed.
because people just don't hang out.
That was one of the
In the sun.
top community.
Yeah. Was it?
Yeah, oh yeah. If you all been out to McEwen, there's not enough trees out there. And you notice it, but thank you.
Yeah, well, I think you can see that from the attendance. Like, you see people in parks where there's more shade.
More shade,
and the
right.
ones when it's on a really, really sunny day, it's pretty empty, so, yeah. Okay.
And if the trees are a problem, there, are occasion for arbors or, something like that to produce shade. But, thank you.
Great, appreciate y'all. Thank you all. All right, staff, did you have something, Kelly?
Well, thank you to our consultant team, and thank you all for your comments on the proposal as we keep working towards an ultimate COA and site plan approval in the fall. Our next step is to have a joint BOMA DRC site walk meeting with materials in August. So we'll have the
Lovely.
materials up by August 5th. So you have that week to go by at different times of day, at night, to look at brick colors, limestone colors. We'll even have different light fixture types to look at. More details about that to come, but that is our next step in the late summer. Thank you all.
Great, thank you. All right, we are going to adjourn this meeting, and then we will start here shortly with our regular Historic Zoning Commission meeting. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.